welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're talking about edgetx. We've got some news and updates on what's going on. I had a very pleasant discussion today with the developers and one of their spokesmen for the developers about what to expect, and there's news to get out. All good stuff too, all good stuff. So very, very happy to hear it all. So I'm going to ask you guys to check in on the chat so we know who's there, if you don't mind. I see Freddie, and if you play the first game, Freddie just curb stomped you guys today because I think I posted this, I don't know, it was some number of hours ago. And before I even got out of the test window where I normally put a little comment in test, Freddie was on it immediately, which is good for Freddie. Boy, he is killing it on the first game lately. I see it looks like Freddie had some sidebar going with Robert that I missed, but at any rate, Robert, I guess, is around, or he was around at one point. I haven't seen him since I started the video, but Rob C is here. Hello, Rob. William Tam says hello. Four Eyes, how you doing? Mad Bren from Ireland, how you doing? Robert, there he is, our Canadian representation from up there in the land of maple syrup and bacon. Romulo Vet, hi, from Brazil. And T-Bird FPV, how you doing? Robert says perfect sound. Good. Thanks for the sound check, Robert. Appreciate you, man. Okay, hang on. Freddie D, hang on. Hang on. Freddie likes to give away videos the best. The educational stuff, it's like you got to drag Freddie kicking and screaming, but he likes to give away videos. So, all right, hey, let's jump into it. I want to give you guys some, we have a couple things to cover today. So not an exciting video in terms of flying or anything like that, but a lot going on with Edge. So let's get into it. I wanted to, the first thing I wanted to do was to kind of paint the scene on Edge. If you're not familiar with Edge at all, I had this conversation with them today, and one of the asks the Edge team had for me is to make sure that we kind of paint the picture on what Edge is. And we'll start off by talking about strong points for Edge. So one thing you'll find out very quickly, and I have to tell you, is, you know, from my experience has been very true, is that Edge is a fast-paced development environment. They plan on doing quarterly releases. So I'm not a software developer, but I believe they refer to that as agile development. So the idea is, rather than have, you know, great big chunks of development at a time, they have a regular cadence for releases. So it's, you know, as they go along, they just release and release and release on a regular schedule. So a little bit smaller, but definitely more regular. And I think that's the game plan for Edge. They definitely will be working on the UI and the user experience. So there's an accent on the speed of use. So their goal is to have not more than 3 clicks to complete any task, to solve a task. And as I've already kind of called out on prior videos, if you use this radio, that's one thing you'll see very quickly, is that the touch has already sped up navigation once you start acclimating to it. So their goal is to really focus on the UI in that sense. And there'll be a lot more to come. You know, they're working really with the initial framework from OpenTX. So quite a bit more to come on this front. They also express an openness to embrace new features. And we have one that we'll talk about in just a little bit that I love because it's been an annoyance for me since I started using OpenTX. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. And they plan on having aggressive development, so they'll introduce things on a rapid pace. So those are the strong points. Now, for targeting, you know, the target group, the thing to understand is that they really kind of expect Edge to be more of an advanced users platform. So in other words, not that you need a degree in mathematics, but that you have some familiarity navigating the core of OpenTX, what OpenTX originally was, or radio configurations in general. And the idea is there is that they're not going to spend much time on things like tooltips. So where you'll get a major advantage is places like my channel, because I will put videos out on a pretty regular basis when new developments occur to show you how to do things, but you shouldn't expect a lot of hand-holding from the radio. They're just not going to spend the time in development for that effort. They expect that you'll have some awareness of how to operate the radio. Now, there will be features that allow for configuration for beginners, and I can tell you there's already, I think in the last video I touched on, I showed a wizard, so they may maintain things like that, but they really are kind of focused on that user community that is comfortable navigating the radio. So here's another example, and this is the one I told you I'd refer to later. One of the things they're doing is if you turn off warnings, so say you go into your model configuration and you go under telemetry and you say disable telemetry alarms. If you enable that right now, every time you reboot the radio is going to say, hey, you turned off telemetry alarms. And OpenTX, they have a philosophy about it, and I'm not here to dispute that. Their philosophy is what it is. In Edge, they're going to not warn you about that. So they're going to have an expectation that, hey, if you turn something off, you know what you're doing and you wanted it to be off. And that I just absolutely love. For me, that's fantastic. Again, I appreciate OpenTX, not meant to be a dig at OpenTX at all. You know, they're doing things to keep people safe and keep their models flying safely, and I understand it. But for me, I really, if I turn it off, stop talking. You know what I mean? So stop talking. I don't want to talk about it. I know I disabled telemetry. That's my problem. And that's the thing I would encourage you guys to think about as you use EdgeTX. If you do embrace the platform and use it and turn off your warnings, that's your issue. It's not theirs. So keep that in mind if you embrace EdgeTX. And overall, that's the other thing that I personally, for me, that I would like to encourage. This is not messaging from Edge, but I would personally encourage you guys to do too. When you think about OpenTX, remember, it's free. These guys are doing it for free. They owe you nothing. These people are not Radio Master. They're not Jumper. They're not Fly Sky. They're not Free Sky. They're individual contributors on their own accord doing this development work. So they owe you that much. You got it? Zero. They owe you zero. You have an operating system on your radio. The work that they're doing is to make the system better for the community. So it's a community effort. And again, these are my words, not theirs. Okay. So you can, if you don't like the messaging here, you can blame me, but I would encourage you guys to be very polite, be accommodating, and understand that EdgeTX is kind of on the edge. It's on, the secret's in the title, right? On the edge. So you have to understand that as you go through EdgeTX revisions, I think their objective has been very clear. Operationally, they intend for the radio to be stable. They intend for it to be stable. You should not have crashed airplanes because of Edge, but you will see things probably out of place from time to time. Just embrace it. Don't expect this to be an Apple iPhone. It's not an Apple iPhone. This is more Android. If that makes sense. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying when I say that, but hopefully that makes sense. It's going to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of development. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. So if you switch off warnings, they will not bug you with warnings that you switched off. All right. So keep that in mind. Personally, for me, I love that. I think that's very cool. The next half of the year, they're also going to be focusing very heavily on creating a Lua API that will enable development with Lua. So a well-documented API for Lua. And that one alone will create an explosion of activity they expect. Because what will happen is with a well-documented API, with error handling and key binding and all those things that go along with Lua, they expect the people who know how to program to get out and push out community scripts, community Lua scripts. So that's one of the big advantages they expect, is to deliver that well-documented Lua API to help people with development. If you don't want any risk and you don't care about novelties and you want just a good, fundamental, basic sound, well-matured, polished operating system, stick with OpenTX. Nothing wrong with that. No harm in that. Stick with OpenTX. But if you kind of like to play around, you like to see new stuff happen, you want to be, on the front edge of things, then EdgeTX might be for you if you're comfortable navigating around the radio. All right. Otherwise, a couple of other points. They are keeping the black and white targets. So the thing that's weird about the black and white targets is there's no clear advantage in moving from OpenTX to EdgeTX on black and white. So in the color space with the color screens and the touch screens, there is a pretty clear advantage, right? I think everyone understands that one. With black and white, it's not so clear. Now, there may be some underlying feature functionality, like when you turn off warnings, you stop getting warned. Maybe that is important to you. There's integration with things like crossfire shot. That might be important to you as well. So think about it from that point of view with black and white targets. There's no crystal clear benefit, but there might be some things that are a little bit more operational or user oriented that you do care for. They will continue supporting black and white targets. So I have been asked that question. Does it support, Tyrannus and the T12 and T8 and so on? And the answer is yes. And they will continue. They do intend at the moment to continue support for black and white targets. Okay, let's talk a little bit about releases. They expect to have quarterly releases that includes tested features. So they'll do their roll-ups from all the minor releases on a quarterly basis. So the minor number, that's the second digit, will be bigger feature additions like YAML or model tagging or Mavlink or things like that. So that's how they're going to plan their rollout schedule in terms of releases, is it's quarterly with minor revisions in between with bigger feature additions on the quarter. And then for the minor release number, the 2.4.1 or 2.2 or 0.3, those will be minor bug fixes and minor improvements. So for example, when the touch implementation starts to show up, it probably won't be like one massive release initially. You'll start seeing incremental improvements and incremental changes to the touch interface with those minor releases. So that's kind of what they have in mind at the moment. But as always, things are subject to change, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I kind of have this idea that they might do some of the key features right away with on their roadmap, maybe one big finale to close it all out, but who knows? We'll see as it progresses. Let's see, roadmap 2.5. I want to talk the roadmap, but before I get into the roadmap, I do want to check comments and questions real quick because I've covered a lot so far, and I just want to pause and scroll back and see if there are any comments or questions I need to address before I move on. So let's see. Rob C says, is Radio Master somehow behind the development of this new fork of OpenTX? I can tell you that I don't think Radio Master was the genesis behind it. There's simply too much activity. I think what happened was that the development community involved with a lot of the other software that we use in equipment these days saw some stagnation in OpenTX, and they decided to take it on themselves to create a fork and continue pushing development. That's what I think. Now, it's possible there were discussions with Radio Master. It's possible Radio Master may have, inspired people. I don't know. I don't know that answer. And not only do I not know, but it doesn't really matter to me. What I care about and what I do see are the development community going to work and pulling together as a team. And I think that's organic. I think what they're doing is organic. I really don't see that there's some, corporate taskmaster behind all this. William Tam says, hello world. Okay, good. Freddie living on the edge. Perfect sound. Good. I had maple bacon today, says Freddie. That's nice. Winner autocorrect knows. Let's see. From Barbados says Brian Crick. How you doing, Brian? Glad you can make it. Freddie and Robert are very active. Robert says, hey, 22 watching, 9 likes. Yeah, hit the like button. That'd be great, man. Hit the like button. Help a brother out. That's awesome. Hitting the like button is very helpful. They are doing a hell of a job, Robert. I agree with you 100%. I like the video so much I hit the like button twice, Robert. Freddie's on it, man. He's smart that way. All right, so let's see. OpenTX 2.3.13. They just can't hit 2.4. Yeah, isn't that something? I kind of expected 2.4 after 2.10, 2.3.10, but whatever. It's okay. Mr. Skywriter. The more I see, the more I like it. Very good. I agree. The more you play with it, the neater it gets. That's for sure. Mr. Skywriter. That was from Mr. Skywriter. Philip Jang, another Aussie. How you doing, Philip? Glad you can make it. I don't know. I think Philip might be the only Aussie on tonight so far. Bill, how you doing? Four Eyes digital HD FPV system for Fat Shark goggles. Okay. Bill, how's it going? Leo Pont says, hey, thanks for these videos. You're welcome. And Glenn Bond says hello. Okay. No other questions. That's it on the comments. So let's move on. Let's press forward. So roadmap 2.5. This is version 2.5 and beyond. So the first thing that we got to get across here on 2.5 is that there is going to be some under the hood coding. So they call it deep level coding. And what that means is things you don't necessarily see. It's not development effort that manifests itself in a visible way. So you don't see some button press or some new iconography or some other thing that makes itself readily visible to you. So there, for 2.5, as we head into 2.5, or as the development team heads into 2.5, there will be a level of deep level coding work that has to occur, and that includes a bunch of cleanup work and efficiency. Again, not necessarily visible. Also on the way to 2.5, this is roadmap stuff. This is a cool one. Okay. There's going to be a Touch UI API for Lua release. So in addition to the Lua API with documented features on how Lua interacts with the radio, they also have a Touch UI API. So you can imagine the amount of development that will spur in Lua space for these radios. Lots of options to utilize the touchscreen when those developers get hold of the touch capabilities on the radio and bake those features into Lua. The YAML format for settings is definitely on, although it's not easily portable it's to replace the not easily portable binary format. We've discussed that already. So they're switching the model configuration over to YAML. The weird thing is there's no memory for YAML in the black and white target. So I'm not exactly sure how they're going to handle that. It may mean that the black and white targets stick with the binary format, but the color radios are all going to get the YAML format for their model configuration. So that's on the way to 2.5. There's also going to be a switch to what they call free RTOS, and that is to replace what they said it's to replace CUCOX and COOS, which are operating systems inside the firmware that enable microcontroller communications and radio support. So the switch to free RTOS, I think that's real-time operating system, means they'll have more accommodation for microcontrollers and radios. So think about things like Bluetooth adapters and GPS units and multi-protocol modules and things like that. So they are going to be integrating that new operating system into the firmware. The radio hardware drivers, in some cases, will be rewritten. There are 12 to 15 of them in total, and at least some of them will be rewritten. So if a target needs a change, they'll rewrite the target. It's going to be demand-based, demand gen. So it's one of those things that's not going to be, they're just not going to engage in an overall, free, crazy rewrite of all the hardware drivers. But in certain cases, for example, in the touchscreen where there might be some error handling, they're going to take a hard look at that and they'll switch over to a DMA/IRQ. They'll eliminate the IRQ model and go to a DMA model. Okay, so in cases where the radio needs a rewrite for firmware, they will be doing that. There'll also be a general cleanup of code over time. And I think you guys have probably, if you're paying close attention, you've probably seen an error message posted about a copy paste bug with the mixer. If you go and look at that's by the way, that bug is what delayed the first release and why they now have an RC5 instead of going from RC4 to the first release. It's because of that copy paste bug. So for mixes, that kind of thing will be cleaned up as well. So general cleanup of code, that's what I'm talking about. When they spot things like that, they'll go through the code and figure out what needs to be rewritten, and they'll do that. And then they're also in the roadmap for 2.5 is native Mavlink support. So if you're a Mavlink user, that should be very good news to you. Okay, let's see. The next up is the build time options. So if you guys are familiar with the OpenTX Companion, there is a way in Companion to select the build options that you want, like Lua or no FAI or no telemetry or override, no override global variable, or sorry, no override channels, no global variables, no heli. There's some options, some build time options. Now, they're probably going to wind up getting away from that a little bit and switching that over to flags that are setup options on the radio itself. The reason that was done in the first place was to preserve memory. So if there were modules you didn't need, you could turn those off, and that would preserve memory for the binary. But the memory issues are kind of not really a problem these days. So what they're thinking about doing is migrating that over and having binaries for every language deployed for download, and then they'll have a option to do things like turn on, like here, if you look on this radio, there's a heli tab. I've never used that on my radio. So if you don't need that, there'll be an option to just turn that off. Regarding things like no FAI, I think that's still up in the air, and it's not clear to me yet how they intend on dealing with that issue. But but it may also be a demand gen based thing. So what I mean by that is it wouldn't surprise me if they just stripped that out and then waited to see how many people clamored for it, you know, and then they might figure out a way to put it back in. So that might be some of the technique they have too, in order to free up development cycles and focus on things that are contemporary, right? That matter to people today. So we'll see how that evolves over time. The moral of the story is the build time options. It looks like they have a couple of different ideas on how to handle that. One of them might be using system configuration instead of actual different compilation options. So, all right, starting with 2.4, Edge will get ahead of OpenTX with 2.5, which is expected in December. So we're at 2.4 now, 2.40, and starting around September timeframe, once we see 2.5 hit the market, that's when you're probably going to see a little bit of separation between OpenTX and Edge. Starting next week, the UI will start to see changes. They're going to start implementing code changes on the user interface. So again, I don't think you'll see an overall rewrite of the interface, but you will, as you flash firmware onto the radio, you will start to see implementations for change in the user interface. Okay, so when they appear is actually undecided, but you'll start to see some things in the minor releases as they come up. And here's another thing, for example, trims to sub-trims. If you're aware of that one, if you click on the output screen, you know that trims to sub-trims option at the bottom is gone. That will probably come back in somewhere around 2.42 or 2.43. So probably, again, you guys, you know, that we don't get to hold them to some, you know, some agreement, right? They'll deploy it when they're ready, but, you know, target is 2.42 to 2.43, if that makes sense. All right, let's see. I want to scroll down just a little bit. Oh, the themes. That was a big one. So the color change capabilities, the color change and themes will be coming up in 2.5. So you'll have access. You will have access to color changes in the branch version. So the minor releases, or during the development cycle, if you look in Flasher, you see these little branches or tributaries that pop up from time to time. You might have options in there to see the themes, but they expect the main release 2.5 to have access to the color change and theme. I know that a lot of people kind of like that one. I like that one. But, you know, like I said, right now they're focused on stability and operations over appearance. And, you know, they didn't do bad. The blue's fine. It looks okay. To give you guys a little bit of scope or idea in what's involved with the UI theme management, right now there are 48 different constants used to change colors in the OpenTX. They want to drive that number down to 10. And by doing that, it again simplifies the codes, makes things more consistent, and it's a lift. It's a big lift to do that. So migrating down from 48 constants down to 10, there's some work to do. You know, they've got to go out and figure out where all those constants are used and migrate down to their scale of 10 that they desire. The next big one are input pop-ups. So I haven't seen them yet. I'm anxious to see them. I can't wait to see them, but they do have input pop-ups are planned. That's the text keyboard, the numbers, the sources, etc. So hang tight. That's on the way. And then let's see. There's numbers, sources, switches. I think we covered that. So on the pop-ups are being designed to support keyboards, numbers, sources, and switches. I think I have some duplicate text there. Okay, next up, widgets. There are two different ways to do widgets on the radio. One of them is to bake them into the code, and the other way is to use Lua. So there are 6 widgets right now that use C inside the firmware. Those will be left. The idea is that those widgets are probably critical for use of the radio without an SD card. So if you have, say, any radio without an SD card or a bad SD card, you might want a thing like a flight timer, right? So that if that widget is built into the firmware right now, it will remain. They're not going to pull those out. So they've identified 6 widgets, critical widgets. I think they're in place today in C. They'll remain in C. The rest of the widgets are Lua, and there will be, of course, support for Lua widgets moving forward. The model select screen, we've talked a little bit about this. So if you go into model select right here, there will be improvements on the model select screen. And one of the key options there is labels. So in the model configuration, they will have an ability to apply a label, and that will kind of generate the categories and filters. So I think the way that's going to work is that you, instead of creating categories in the settings somewhere, you'll have labels, and when you create a model, you can apply a label to it, if that makes sense. All right, let me take a pause there. I'm going to put a big space in my notes, and I want to go back and check the comments and see if there's anything I need to address before I go any further. Let's see. What features do you think, Leo Pont says, what features do you think are the most important on edgetx versus OpenTX? Well, I just covered a bunch of them, Leo, and I don't want to go through the whole thing again, but I mean, obviously touchscreen, things like baking and crossfire shot, making that available now, the warning support, YAML configurations. I mean, you know, there's a pretty big list, but at the end of the day, I think it's kind of up to the end user to determine that. I think Edge obviously provides the touch support. That's a big deal. You know, it's kind of nice to have that. And then, of course, we'll see a rewrite of the code. They're going to implement things like full screen widgets. They're going to do key bindings to widgets. I mean, that's a long list, man. It's a long list. If you have a color radio, this is kind of a transformational event for color radios. It's really going to change things, I think, on these radios. Let's see. Hello, everyone. Fellow Ripper says props off. Glad you can make it. Hey, Steven. Hello from Commerce Township, Michigan. Good to see you, Steven. Let's see. Congratulations. Oh, hey, props off. Thank you. Props off says congratulations on 14K. Yeah, we turned over 14K on the subscriber counter today. That was cool. Rob C says a little off topic, but what's your observations about Powell's comment that FPV is a zombie? Only 40 watching, a very informative stream, somewhat disappointing. I don't know what Powell's comment. I don't have any context for FPV as a zombie, Rob C, so I can't really address that one. I'm sorry. Will edgetx work on a 9XR Pro? I don't believe it's supported, Brian, on the 9XR Pro. You can download the EdgeFlasher and look, but I don't believe I've seen 9XR Pro listed. Robert says, props off finishing a new build. Okay, a few builds. Good. Comments. Let's see. I'm looking for comments. Domingo, I want to switch from OpenTX, but I'm really thinking I'll wait since it's all new. I've heard people click disabled telemetry and motors accelerate on their own. I haven't heard that one yet. I did hear somebody say that when you have a throttle warning on your startup screen, that if you dismiss it, you could have a runaway prop. But my argument on that is if your throttle override switch is working effectively, then it doesn't matter what the screen says because the switch is the governor. So I'm not sure. I haven't heard that one on telemetry, but yeah, that would be alarming. I can see where that'd be alarming. If you see that kind of thing, and by the way, hey, let's not pay too much attention to rumors either. If you guys really want to know what's going on, go over to GitHub, click on the issues and look at the issues. And if they've been reported as issues or bugs, you'll see them there. They don't hide anything. It's all out there for everybody to see out on GitHub. Robert says 2 AR Pros, 3 long range bigger planes, good. Brutus says, how much of the CNC aluminum pieces for the Radio Master do you think will fit on that one? Not much. Yeah, very little, actually. Maybe the rings, maybe the switch end, the knob ends, and the handle, and that's about it. I don't think much more than that. It would not be worth it to buy the CNC kit to put on this radio for sure. The buttons won't work, the faceplate won't work, the gimbals probably won't work. The gimbals might work, but then you lose the configuration option, the screws. So I don't think I would do that. All right. Utah representative here says Jeff, Captain FPV. Welcome, Jeff. Glad you can make it. Lee Kitching. If I crossed over to Edge, are the ongoing updates easy to do? Oh yeah. The EdgeFlasher makes it really easy. I mean, flashing a firmware, once you've done it a couple times on this radio, is insane. In fact, I'll be putting a snippet together on exactly how to do a bootloader firmware upgrade, because directionally that's where they're going with Flasher. So I will be putting a snippet together for that. But yeah, flashing this thing is stupid easy. It's really not hard. I mean, if you flash it once, you can flash it again. This radio has been flashed countless times, and it's really not very hard. It's as simple as connecting a USB cable, dragging a file onto your card, booting it up in a certain mode, and hitting flash. It's very simple. I think a lot of people are waiting for the first stable release. Freddie, yeah, I think so too. And that's not a bad thing. Edge is one of those environments, right, where we covered up front that it's a development world. So It's not a terrible thing from an operating standpoint. And I actually discussed this with them today too. I said, I think you got to think of the user community for Edge is two types, right? There's going to be what they call fearless, right? The fearless people are people like me that are we're hair on fire, got to have the latest thing. And, we're willing to test it, but I've got a platform to do it. I've got a spare radio. I've got airframes that I can afford to lose. So I don't mind doing that kind of testing because I want to see. And because I run a channel, I want you guys to see. So, I have some motivation to do this. There's going to be plenty of people who are going to say, no way, Jose. I want a flat, stable system with no experimentation, and I perfectly respect that. There's absolutely no concern on my mind for people who think like that. And for those people, you probably should wait for the final release or the first stable release, right? I 100% agree with that. No arguments. But, what's cool is if you like to tinker and experiment, and you like to try out new stuff, well, it's there. You can do it. Let's see. Glenn Bond says runaway motor with DSM only. Okay, so that's a DSM bug, huh? I'm going to leave that alone, Glenn. 4i says, nice gimbal covers. Yeah, I got these on Thingiverse and printed it with black TPU, in case you want to know. They're available on Thingiverse. I've been thinking of building a small... Okay, got a little sidebar going. Okay. JDM says, I'm not using it on my 700 helicopter yet. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. Yeah. Well, although I did do a flight with my Chimera 7-inch, which is, it's not a cheap one because it has DJI and it's a big quad, but I did it. But I don't, all I did was I wanted to do it so I could say I have a vote of confidence. But yeah, I completely respect, watching and waiting and biding your time, right? There's no point in risking expensive aircraft if you're not sure. And that's another point that the developers are very comfortable suggesting, is that if you're in that frame of mind, then there's no reason to move to Edge. Stick with OpenTX and you can ride it out. Nobody should feel pressure to switch to Edge, right? Nobody. Don't, and in fact, I would encourage the opposite. Don't get on the bandwagon just because you see other people doing it. You do it because you see something you like, right? And I've said this before, I'm at a point right now where I believe it's operationally stable. I don't have any problems operationally running it, but there are some things missing, that like Companion, for example, that might be aggravating to some people. All right, let's move on. I got a few more things to cover and we can wrap this up. So keep your questions coming while I finish up. We've only got one small section to go. The model select screen is where I left off. There'll be improvements with the labels and list of labels applied to models. Next is the application select screen. So there's going to be a tools screen where you can select applications to run on the main screen. So if you think about this main screen being a launch pad like your phone, right? Like your phone, how on your phone you've got all these home screens on your phone. Think about the main screen being like that. So they envision this idea where there'll be an application section where you can pick an application to reside on your home screen and you'll be able to launch it right from there. So that's kind of what they're thinking about when we hear about the application selection screen. The application mode will allow binding of keys for use within the app. So if you do have, say, for example, the Fly Me to the Moon script, which I've shown you guys before, if you see that Fly Me to the Moon script run, and this becomes an application that you put on your home screen for launch. So if you put that, say, I don't know why I can't get back out of there. That thing does that to me every now and then. That's why it's not ready for prime time. That's why he hasn't released it yet. But if you do take something like your Fly Me to the Moon script and make that a launcher on your home screen, then the developers will have the ability to not only give you the touchscreen interface via Lua, but also bind to the buttons. So that's kind of what they have in mind. There'll be a single place to see applications and choose which of those apps appear on your home screen. No problems when that happens for the Lua developers to make their script your home screen, which is really cool because that will enable things like this one, right? When you see that Fly Me to the Moon, that's a Lua script. There will be no problem making that your actual home screen. You'll be able to, plug that in and have that be home. So there we go again. Yeah, it's got some kind of lock. That's actually new. That might be with something going on with the one of the firmwares that I have on this thing, but yeah, that's the idea, right? Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about that one, let me know, but I think I've covered that well enough. Okay, let's talk about Flasher. So here's what's going to happen with Flasher. Flasher is going to be the new user, new person touching EdgeTX for the first time. That's going to be their first contact with EdgeTX. So they want it to be a little more polished and intuitive to use. So they have that on mind. You know, they want to tidy it up. I personally don't think it looks terrible the way it is, but they want to continue improving, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. And they do want to make it a little more intuitive. They will make a pivot. So right now, if you're not aware of using Flasher, when you fire up Flasher and you choose a firmware, the method of an installation on the firmware right now is via DFU. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but they are going to make a pivot. So the pivot will be to download the proper firmware binary and put it on your SD card. And then you'll want to use the bootloader after that to flash. There are reasons for that. You may not like the sound of that. When they initially told me about it, I was like, I kind of like the way it works now, but after hearing it out, I understood why. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But they do intend to make a pivot. So rather than flashing direct from the flasher, the binary is put on your card and you flash from your card directly from the radio. So we'll get into that momentarily. And the bottom line is you'll be using the bootloader going forward. They do also view Flasher as a tool for beginners. And you know what that means is basically when I update firmware on my radio, I don't use Flasher. The only thing that I ever really use Flasher for at this point is to show you guys how Flasher works, or if I want to check out what's going on with the SD card contents. But that's it. So they do view, you know, when I'm adding firmware, and like I've said, I've flashed this thing countless times at this point. I never use the flasher to do that. I always use the bootloader mode, just because it's fast. So let's talk about DFU mode. So DFU mode is the way in Windows where the USB interface can send a stream of blocks of data to a firmware device. And the problem is that DFU is a dead end. And here's why it's a dead end. The protocol on Windows doesn't support error checking. There's no option in Windows for error checking. So if there's a problem, Windows via DFU won't tell you that there's a problem. And it's also quite a bit slower. So when you connect to DFU mode, when you connect the radio in DFU mode to Windows, you won't know if there's a failure until you boot. You'll get a notification saying everything was fine. You go to boot and you've got a corrupted firmware. Well, it could be USB cable, it could be electromagnetic interference, could be your USB port, could be you have a bad radio, who knows? You know, it could be a bad chip inside the radio, there's no telling. But the point of the matter is that when you do that in Windows, there's no error correction or notification. It's just a streaming protocol, and there's no way of knowing if it was truly successful. So by switching over to the bootloader mode, number one, it's faster, and number two, it does know if it's flashed correctly or not. And that's why they're going to switch over to that method for upgrading firmware in the future. So you can expect to see that in upcoming releases of Flasher. Not sure when yet, but that's on the way. The most reliable method of upgrading the firmware is via the bootloader. Let's see. There will be a DFU mode for backup, however. So if you're familiar with DFU mode and you're comfortable using it, they're not saying they're taking it out, but that's not going to be the primary method of adding EdgeTX firmware to the radio. All right. So release updates. Let's cover this real quick and then we're done. There will be an RC5. Okay. So there's going to be a release candidate 5. And again, I mentioned that earlier in the video. The main reason for that is because of there's a bug with copy and paste in the mixer, which I personally have never used. So I never understood why they considered that serious. I would say, yeah, it's kind of serious if you copy and paste something and your controls don't work. But I also would maintain that before you fly, you should check to make sure your controls work. So I personally never saw it as that big of a deal, but I understand the hesitance to put that out there. So that's what's holding them up. They're going to do an RC5, which should fix the copy paste thing that's going on with the mixer. And then within a few days, the main release, the first release. The touchscreen driver, I think I've covered this enough at this point. You guys have heard me because I was really kind of heavily involved in trying to figure out what the heck was going on with this thing. But the touchscreen driver right now is in a state where they feel it is stable enough to be released in a first release. But they do have a rewrite plan for moving or migrating to a DMA mode of operation. So bottom line, they're not thrilled with the hardware driver for the touch interface. and they are going to be switching and rewriting some of that hardware driver code. There is a bug in the driver. They're not sure where it is, and they don't want to. Yeah, they don't want to get into one of these scenarios. So who cares? They know that they can do things to address it. So their plan is to rewrite the driver. Let's see. Right now, even though the bug exists, as you can see on my screen, and I have a tendency of being able to lock this sucker up fast. So I've found ways to lock this thing up fast. Right now, they have a way to trap that bug and to reset it very quickly. So from the user's standpoint, it manifests itself as a minor glitch or a minor delay. Almost like if you go in to read your models, you know how that little read delay on OpenTX occurs, or if you're paging between categories, you get that little delay. That's what you would expect in touchscreen, same kind of concept. So you press the screen, instead of getting an instant reaction, the worst case scenario is you might see a minor delay, and that's it. So that's the way they're couching that one right now, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Because so far, I've been unable to get it to freeze, and this has been at least a full week at this point. So that's it. Those are all the updates, the release updates. What's going on with RC5? We talked about the roadmap and what's happening there, and we talked about the state of the state with where the EdgeTX team wants to focus on their strengths and the target group. And then the last thing is there is an announcement I have to make. This is a public service announcement for the Edge team. Okay. If you live in the US and you have experience in coding in C, the Edge team needs some help with GitHub tagging and identification. So by the end of the week, they will have the needs clearly spelled out and posted. If you have these types of skills and you like to make contributions to the team, the developers are looking for a little bit of help. And the reason is because a lot of the development team lives in Europe. They have some in Australia. So there's a huge gap in time zones with the US, and they want to be highly responsive. So if you've got experience in C and you understand how to operate GitHub or work within GitHub, and you understand the concepts of tagging, if you go look at all the issues that get posted, you tag that as a bug, an issue, a gripe, or a feature enhancement, whatever. They need a little bit of help with that, especially if you live in the US. So if you've got experience and you're not sure where to go, but you'd like to help out, you can reach out to me. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. So I'll do this. We'll do it this way. So there we go. My email address is in the chat. If you're not sure where to go, send me an email and I will connect you to the Edge development team. And they definitely are looking for the help. So if you've got those abilities and you'd like to help out and help the community out, please feel free to reach out or keep an eye out on GitHub for when they will make that announcement. Okay, I'm going to scroll back real quick and see if there are any comments I missed, and we're going to wrap it up. Let's see here. I've been thinking of building a small wing. Okay, there's props off and Freddie or Robert going on. Domingo, Freddie D, yes, unstable release. Yeah. Robert, JDM. I'm not using it on my 700. We covered that one already. Lee, thanks. I will take the jump to Edge as I always have to also change the SD card content. Yeah, the SD card flash process is really good. The Emily sound pack is really good. The one thing I'd caution you on is make sure you back up things like your images. If you have any screenshots, if you have any custom scripts that you've done. I did my own custom Express LRS script, and during one of my updates, I blew it away. I couldn't believe it. I might still have it on another radio, but just be careful if you have custom scripts. Drone Pilot, well, you finally woke up and made it. Waking up down there, Elias? Welcome to the session. Let's see. Hello. Everyone's saying hello. Talking about modes, does that text at the bottom of your screen says mode 1? Does it? That's a flight mode. That's a flight mode option is what that is. So what I was probably doing some kind of testing, but yeah, it just says mode 1 right there. That's what I named it. I think I was just doing some testing. It's not meant to be a flight mode, Robert, but hey, that's a good catch. That'd be a good prank to play on somebody if they didn't know that. But yeah, that's an indicator of the flight mode button, that are 6-position switch button. All right, let's see. It's time to put the screen on the top of the radios again. says Sully. Oh, that'd be interesting. Maybe with the TX17 or TX18S. I don't know. Pure speculation. I don't know. But yeah, you know, maybe that might be cool on top of the radio. I don't know. I kind of like it down here because that's my thumbs are. It's natural for my thumbs down here. You know, my hands. I hold my radio like this, and I think going up like that would be a lot more problematic than just swinging my thumb down. So I don't know. Ergonomically, I think I kind of prefer this. But you know, who knows? Robert says, I don't know if I missed it, but is there a way to know when we need to update the SD card contents when flashing nightlies or new 2.4 builds? You know, Robert, that's a great question. And I don't know. I don't have a direct answer for you on that. What I can tell you is that they don't seem to be very picky about it on Edge. Because as you're well aware by asking that question, on OpenTX, if you flash anything, you better flash new SD card contents or add new. You shouldn't say flash SD card contents, but you know what I'm saying. You copy the new SD card contents over. I've flashed, I don't even know, countless binaries, and this thing is yet to pester me on SD card contents. So what I expect, here's what I'd expect. I know that the guy responsible for the SD card contents and the sound files, they all work very closely together. So I would expect that if there's a firmware requirement for updated SD card contents, you should be able to get to that easily from the flasher. So that's what I would expect. I know that's not a great answer. It's the best one I can give you. But so far, I haven't really seen much of a demand in terms of changing SD card contents based on the firmware. But yeah, that's a very good question. Robert says, note to Freddie, take the tinfoil hat off in DFU mode. That's right, Freddie. We got to get a picture of Freddie with his tinfoil hat on. That'd be good. I need to wrap my whole house in. Yeah, so that's what I mean. Freddie wants to wrap his house in tinfoil. That's how you're getting internet from your neighbors. Yeah, with the tinfoil. That's right. He shapes them in the shape of a Yagi, and he points them at his neighbors. That's how he gets his internet. All right. I think the cold weather starting. Okay, on the job training. All right, we're just having some fun. What did I type it wrong, Robert? RC video reviews. Oh, I didn't type it wrong. Okay, let's see. 2 holes in that radio. Good, Robert. Problem with the screen at the bottom is us strap users can't glance. I use a strap. I've used a strap the entire time, and all I've ever done is just give it one little twist. Man, I always use a strap because I'm hand launching and tossing and chucking stuff all the time. So all I do is just pick it up, give it a little twist. That's all. It works for me. But yeah, I've been using a strap the entire. I always have a strap. In fact, my strap is in my radio bag right now. I could go get it. All right. So I dare you to try tinfoil hat, that because it makes me feel better. Yeah, that'd be funny. Well, maybe Freddie and I are going to be flying soon because I have a helicopter on the way and Freddie's going to teach me. So maybe we'll get some tinfoil and we'll get a picture. That'd be good. Let's see. Simply by chance, my house is wrapped in tinfoil, but that was for another reason. It also has tar. All right. Well, I think that's officially closes out the topic because we've degenerated into tinfoil hats and houses. So that's pretty good. All right, guys. Hey, listen, I don't see any other questions. I'm going to give you one last call. But while I do my close, I just want to tell you guys to keep your eye out on the channel for edgetx snippets. I will continue my work in the snippet space. And by the way, I'm not completely punting on OpenTX. I know I've spent a lot of time with edgetx lately, and I haven't produced OpenTX material, but that's not for lack of will, it's for lack of content. So if something comes up with OpenTX, I'll be keeping an eye on OpenTX too. You know, I'm not completely kicking them to the curb. I do not have Edge on everything I own, only on 2 of the 4. So there's that. Just keep that in mind. But I will definitely be producing, as EdgeTX starts to matriculate out, I will be producing material on EdgeTX, specifically where there are differences between EdgeTX and OpenTX. So initially, I don't expect to do a video on how to create a mix because I've already done a dozen videos on how to create a mix. So with that in mind, you know, keep an eye out on the channel when there's EdgeTX specific material that's worth creating a video on. I will produce it. It'll be an EdgeTX snippet, and you'll know where to find it because I keep all that stuff in a playlist. Robert says, great coverage of Edge, John. Thanks. Another great show. You're welcome. Appreciate that. Can we change the right to tinfoil? Title. Can we change the title to tinfoil? No, Freddie, no one's going to search for that. Although maybe, you know, if I did, I'd probably get 1 billion hits on the video, but then is that the crowd that I really want watching the video? That becomes the next question. So, hey, EdgeTX won't be on Precious. You know, if I'm not mistaken, I think EdgeTX is on Precious, but I'm not sure. I'll have to revisit that. I know it's been on Precious, I can tell you that. All right, with that, guys, I want to give a big shout out to my Patreons and invite you, if you feel like I help you and you're learning things here and you like the stuff that comes on RC Video Reviews in terms of content, please consider joining me if your budget allows on patreon.com/RC Video Reviews for as little as $3 a month. You can join the channel and help support the channel and keep things moving forward. And I just want to give a big thanks to my existing patrons. Thank you, guys. I really do appreciate you for helping me shoulder the burden on the video in terms of managing the finances and keeping new content coming. So thank you very much for that. That's all I've got for tonight. Thanks for joining me. Take it easy.